In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we're coloring conversations on America's canvas. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome an inspiring voice in leadership, culture, and student empowerment, Kyle S. King, an 8-time published author, dynamic speaker, and seasoned educator. Kyle has transformed schools, organizations, and lives through his contagious energy and purpose-driven approach to leadership. He's the founder of the Writer's Game, a publishing platform that amplifies the stories of professionals and educators, and formerly served as director of school culture and student advancement at Bonnie Combe Schools Network. Over the past decade, Kyle has helped thousands of leaders and students reconnect with their purpose, lead with empathy, and create communities that thrive. Today, he's here to challenge us, inspire us, and move us towards contagious culture and sustainable success. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring to the show Mr. Kyle King. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Brother King, how are you?
I am just excellent. Is there anything you'd like to add to your bio?
No. I'm a father and a man of God. I think those come first before anything. I think a lot of times we live based upon the professional titles, but before anything, I'm a man of God, and I am a devoted and a committed father to raising my two beautiful children.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm sure that the audience is going to learn a lot about
Thank
the
you.
work that you do. Let's jump into the show here. We're going to talk about you as the consultants for school culture.
Yes.
Can you tell us what inspired you to focus on school culture as a consultant?
School culture is the foundation of any great organization. Culture is the heartbeat, the energy, the mood, and the invisible curriculum that oftentimes runs any organization. When we think about content, when we think about the relationships between people, when we think about the overall interactions between employees or any constituent, it's the underlying interactions, it's the conversations that are not had, it's the either the lack of trust or the trust that is being forged that usually runs and creates those unwritten rules and paths within organizations. So I think a lot of times we can talk about the skill set to be able to do something. I can teach a teacher how to be more restorative in classroom behavior, but I can't necessarily see some of how the relationships are impacting our day-to-day operations. So I believe it's the gateway curriculum to be able to really foster achievement and high quality impact among schools around the country.
Hmm. Can you describe a typical consulting engagement and what it entails?
Oh, of course. So it would first start with an audit. So a school that I just left earlier this week, I came in and we just simply had conversation. And just like any relationship, any interaction, we would start with, hey, what are some of the things that you're currently doing? What are some of the things that you're seeing that you want to be able to accomplish? And the reality of it is where are the gaps that are hindering you from being able to accomplish that? Understanding the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. I think a lot of times we don't really, as consultants, as problem solvers, we don't listen enough to the problem. So I'm really listening to, well, what is the vision of this school? Who are the leaders? Where are the challenges? And then I want to be able to identify all of the gaps. What's most important? What are the pain points? What are the specific objections from the staff? What are solutions that they would want to be able to create? When I look at the current landscape of their team, what are the skill sets? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? And then at that point, we would build out, my team and I, we would build out what we call a recommendation report or an audit. In that report, it's a 10 to 15 page document of everything that we just see. So we're going to communicate, hey, you're doing this well, but based upon what you're saying your goals are, based upon what you're saying where you want to take this organization or this school, this is what we believe you need to focus on. Now, the beautiful part of that is on the back end, a lot of schools will see this and they'll say, great, we'll take this and we'll be able to implement it. The challenge that we see, though, is that if we're currently operating from this perspective, we may not have either A, the people, B, the processes, or C, the systems in place to be able to implement the various things that we present in the audit. So at that point, then we would go to stage 2 and then present a proposal on our team coming in and being able to work beside their organization or their school leaders so that we can work with you on the strategic implementation of the specific things that we've set in that audit, whether that is helping your developmental team raise funds or build your philanthropic giving portion of your school, whether that is working with new teachers on how to be more restorative or culturally relevant within the classroom, whether that is working with your leaders to be able to be more efficient and understand how to assess and analyze data, how to approach aligning your school curriculum and decision making with the vision and mission of the board members of the school. So we help them on the back end. And then the third step is constant and continuous coaching and consulting, where our team would come in on a quarterly basis and we would assess, we would continue to put those KPIs and measures in place and be able to track that school towards what we call a success metric and be able to assess a contagious culture.
So, what are some of the normal results that you see from the projects that you've worked on with some of the schools? Have they been pretty positive, or have there been some that you really had to get down into the dirt and you really had to grind?
Interestingly, I think it's more of the latter. Fortunately and unfortunately, because when it's more of the latter, where there's schools that we really have to get in the dirt and grind, we can really see a return on investment, but then we can also see a transformation. When you think of anything that you're trying to build, here is where you're trying to go, but oftentimes here is where you are. All of that middle point is what we call the transformative process. And anything that we're doing, it's those steps and those processes and that framework that leads people from point A to point B of what we like to call it. So I think it's more of the latter. The challenges that we're seeing is that simply a lot of the challenges that people are experiencing at home, Charles, they bring to work with them. And I believe that people have to learn how to unpack before they can truly be committed to making an impact within any organization, whether it's a classroom, a boardroom, or any corporate entity. We have to be able to understand, what am I either bringing to the table or bringing to these conversations? Because out of the mouth, the heart speaks. Out of the mouth, you surely show up to understanding what was poured into you. So once we understand, okay, how to build quality relationships with people, how to understand, well, what is the zone of genius of all of the individuals on our team, then we understand, well, if there's a behavior problem within our school, maybe there's a relational issue. Well, what am I seeing on the data board on where these behaviors actually coming from? Is it a set group of teachers, or what are the specific behaviors that we're seeing? Is it disrespect? Is it assault? Or what are the behaviors? Now, when we break down the behavior, let's read the descriptions. What is actually happening? Because then we start to see specific trends. If it's data in regards to academic achievement, because schools are based upon growth scores, not necessarily just one metric. So if I'm seeing that a certain group is struggling with this specific North Carolina state standard, then maybe there's someone that we need to partner with to be able to reteach, be able to look at the lesson plan and understand how we can be able to better approach. But everything, again, is a culture issue. When we look at the processes of the school and how we're even looking and approaching data and behavior, that's a culture challenge. When we're looking at how we assess team members or evaluate leaders, that is a culture challenge. When we look at the processes on how we bus students from specific neighborhoods, that is a specific culture challenge. When we look at the exit interviews for students or teachers that are leaving, but also the onboarding process, that is a culture challenge. And when I look at culture, and anybody listening, what is the experience when you go into this school? Whether it's pulling into the parking lot, walking into the front door, touring the hallways, interacting with teachers, how do you feel in all of these different interactions? What questions do you have? What mood do you feel? What energy are people giving off? What do you hear? What do you experience? What do you see? And that would really be able to determine what these experiences are for the specific constituents within this organization. When you go to any hotel or resort, they pride themselves off a high quality 5-star experience, but oftentimes in schools, our students and our children aren't experiencing that.
So tell me this. So like, let's say you got one of these schools that they call an underserved school, a school that's really hurting culturally when we talk about culture. Have you dealt with one of those kind of schools before?
Definitely, yes.
And so when you are dealing with that kind of school, how do you approach the board, the powers that be, with the things that you see are problems, and are they working to make those things work?
Charles, that's a great question. One of the things that I've learned and what we implement within the organization is we have to attach solutions to what's most important to the leaders because that's what they care about. In any school that I go to, any board member that I sit with, and even as a former board member myself, the board cares about two things almost more than anything, just from a fiscal responsibility and a governance standpoint. Number one is financial responsibility. So enrollment, and the dollars of the school. How can we continue to push students within butts and seats? And then how are we managing and maximizing the resources that we have as a school? And then number two is academic performance. If you have board members that don't know how to read budget statements, and you have board members that aren't qualified to be able to understand how to read data from an achievement standpoint, in my opinion, they shouldn't have the opportunity to be board members. So I first assess that. So I go into the board room or the meeting and ask, what are the biggest challenges that you're seeing in regards to reaching your enrollment goals or hitting your performance goals? And then I wait. Usually we're assessing schools that are F, Ds, or C schools. That's our target audience because it's all the same. If it's an F school, you're either struggling with two things: enrollment problems because parents don't want to send their student to a failing school, or B, it's a performance challenge, and that's why you're an F school. Now we have to ask ourselves, why are we an F school? And we can't just blame the students. And that's always what we like to do, is we want to blame the students. But if I take the highest performing teachers at that A school and the highest performing leaders at that A school and bring them over to the F school, within 2 to 3 years, we'll be able to transition that school to where it needs to be. And then I ask them, the third question is, okay, well, what type of school do you want to build? And what we do is we build what we call a portrait of a graduate. When someone leaves your K-5 or your K-8 or your K-12 institution, what would you want them to learn? What would you want them to innovate, create, become, and do? When you see that student, whether it's a young woman or a young man, graduate from your school or leave or transition away from your school, what would you want them to be? Now, when we think about that student, we design that student. We create a character. Now, when we think about that student, Mr. King, what type of teacher would have to be able to best equip or educate or empower that type of student? And then we build the portrait of a high-performing teacher for that specific type of student. And then we go one step. Well, what type of leader would we need to be able to develop that type of teacher, to be able to empower that type of teacher? Then we say, all right, what are the interview questions that we would need so that we can best assess these types of people in this performance process? What are the type of evaluation metrics that we would need so that we can assess throughout the process? What is the curriculum that would best serve those students? What are the processes that we need in place? What are the accountability measures that we need in place for parents as well? And then we work the measure backwards. Now, as a board member, Mr. King, my next question to you, are you the board member that can lead those leaders, hire those teachers, and empower those students? Now, what type of training would we need for you as a board member to be able to enhance your overall school community? This is why we would want to be able to come in and do an audit for your school so that we can be able to provide the best opportunities for your students to succeed, as well as for your performance grade to increase, as well as your school to be able to get better enrollment.
So in all of that, because that's really a strenuous process, and I can honestly believe that, when you got to pick all the hairs out, you're actually trying to get the very best.
Yep.
So in that process, have you found that some of the teachers at some of these schools are just not qualified?
Yes, of course. The truth of the matter, Charles, is that there's many people, and not just in education, but in any industry, that are not qualified to be there. And the truth of the matter is we have to first assess, what does it mean to be qualified? Because looking on paper, when I first started in education, I wasn't qualified. Yes, I was a graduate of college, and I had a bachelor's in finance and international business, but I had no teaching certification. I had no education in education. I had no training or any of those different things. I started simply as a volunteer, and what I talk about in my book is I had a heart to be able to really be able to empower students. And I came in and I just built relationships, and I started as a volunteer, and then that turned to subbing, and then that turned in, I was running this program called JA Biz. By the end of the year, I was the director of marketing of that school based upon relationships and results. The next year, I was asked to be the dean of students. And then one thing continued to build from another. I opened my own school. I became a board member. I went back and then taught 8th grade ELA, became an assistant principal, then director of culture, then publishing. All of these other things came after first having a heart to serve and a heart to learn, and being committed to be coachable and humble enough to serve these students to the best of my ability. I say people aren't qualified because I don't believe that there's a lot of educational programs out there that are fully training and equipping teachers in college to the challenges and the rigor that it's actually going to take going into these schools and performing at a high level. Yes, you may have curriculum. Yes, you may have all of these methodologies and techniques that we teach in textbook, but there's so many people out here that may not have the credentials that I'm seeing that are outperforming those people because they have a heart to serve and they're committed to really being able to make a change.
Well, because I guess I'm understanding that, but so what? I guess the real question is, what is the actual effects of those teachers that aren't able to bring these students up to where they need to be? If they're not qualified, to get them there, then do you recommend otherwise, or how does that work?
That's a great question. I think in education, what I love most is that data tells a story. In any education, if a teacher is underperforming, they're put on a performance plan. And I love to go in there with our team and work with those teachers first that are currently on action plans or that are currently underperforming, so that we can be able to work with those teachers first, because those students oftentimes are not necessarily being served in the best of their ability. We make recommendations, yes, and then we're able to work with them on the interviewing process, on equipping new teachers to be able to come into the building. The other challenge that we have is that the data shows that many people are leaving the profession of education, and as many people are exiting careers in education, there's not many people backfilling those careers. We're going to need millions of teachers within the next 5 to 10 years, and there's going to be so many students, so many classrooms that do not have educators. So it is challenging to go into the school and say, hey, I believe that you need to remove this person, What we do is provide them more so of a solution approach. I think that this person needs training or development in this area, and we love to be able to partner them with this solution. And the goal is either you coach them up or you coach them to the point where they actually exit themselves.
Okay, that's a really good approach. I like that because it does give the opportunity to correct and to make it better.
Yeah.
What do you believe are the most critical components of a positive school culture?
That is a great question. I think empathy is first. I definitely think empathy and being it, because empathy is the backbone of building relationships. You have to be able to understand other people. You have to consider the needs and the wants and the desires, but then also the challenges of the people that you serve. And I don't think from a leadership perspective or from a teacher perspective or from any perspective, you can really be able to make the best decisions for the organization if it's not driven from a place of empathy and compassion. So I think empathy comes first. I think transparency comes next. I think that in my experience, there's many organizations that we partner with, as well as my experience as a teacher and as even a parent, that education isn't as transparent as it needs to be. There's so many things that are kept to the hip and kept to the chest, but in a business where we're working with children, and I say it because it is still a business, we need to be able to be transparent when we're in a deficit, when we're needing certain things, be transparent with your staff members when they're not meeting the mark, be transparent when you're starting to see things that are disrupting the culture. I think those two things are very important. High expectations and standards are number three. So I would say empathy is definitely number one. When we look at transparency being number two, I think high standards and expectation are number three, because we have to understand that the standard is the standard. And when we look at creating contagious culture, you can't challenge people to produce more, to become more, and to empower more if they don't know what we're going after. It's kind of like driving a car with a blindfold on and not expecting to get in a car crash. It's very challenging. So I think having a standard, communicating that standard, and enforcing and upholding that standard is absolutely critical. And then I think mission alignment. And what that means is everyone needs to understand, know, and fall in love with the mission, and it needs to be lived in every action, behavior, and decision organizationally. I walk into schools and I see these beautifully written mission statements, but when I speak to the students, when I interact with teachers, when I connect with parents, and when I meet with board members, the mission does not exist. When I look at certain processes and reasons that you suspended a student or expelled a student, it's not existent or in alignment with your mission statement. So again, empathy would be number one, transparency would be number two, standards of excellence would be number three, and really being able to understand all of these are very important to be able to understand that mission alignment as well.
So when you think about the schools in general, when you're there, let's say, I want to make sure I word this right because I don't want this to come out wrong. Just when you're thinking about, let's just say all of those things you were talking about, the empathy culture of not culture, but the standard of excellence and things of that nature. With all of those things in mind, how far do you think some schools are willing to go and are serious about really correcting some of those issues?
I don't personally think that many schools are willing to go as far as they should go, to be very honest with you, Charles. I think one of my mentors said years ago, sometimes problems exist for years at a time and for decades at a time because they exist because people want them to exist. And as you can hear, you know, there's a lot of noise in schools, just like you hear right now in the background. There's so many there's so much bureaucracy, there's so much politics, there's so many things that exist within schools that oftentimes are not being met with a clarity and an identity of starting with heart and building a consistent, contagious culture in a sense as well. And I think when that exists, when that happens, and there's all of bureaucracy, or there's various reasons or metrics that aren't being met, there's no excuse why Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system is the second largest district in the state with the second largest budget in the state, but it's the most underperforming district in the state. When we look at the budgets and when we look at where money flows within a lot of these organizations and within a lot of these school districts, when we look at the people that are in these positions, and not to make this controversial, but just to be honest here, the truth is in the realities, the truth is in the results. I personally believe, and this is why I battle with even staying within education from a school standpoint, why I love to be a consultant and work with schools that I believe in and that I believe in their leadership and that we can really align with from a value perspective, is because I don't personally believe or professionally believe that I believe that there are some schools that do not want to see students succeed. Because if they do, they would be willing to remove leaders from positions. They would be willing to step down as board members. They would be willing to be held accountable for ineffectiveness and inefficiency. They would be willing to hear the voice of parents and students in their communities. They would be willing to be more transparent about where the budgets are actually going. They would be willing to bring in outside resources to be able to contribute to the growth of their school. They would showcase that in their actions, rather than suspending students, they would have more of a restorative approach. Rather than keeping teachers in place because we don't have other teachers in the pipeline, they would build teachers up, they would coach teachers out, and I would rather have classrooms of 40 students per class than have 6 teachers in my district just to reduce class sizes that have implicit bias, that are harming our students, that don't believe in students, that label our students, that are causing toxicity in the school systems and the cultures. I would rather have an interim principal rather than a principal that doesn't align with a vision and a mission. I would rather have empty seats so that we can have the best people that are serving students and serving teachers, rather than a lot of the, frankly, Charles, the mess that we're seeing within education.
That is about as real as it gets, because you know, when you say those things that you're saying, I mean, it's clear that it's like I don't know how to just say it, but schools are in danger. And you know, for these kids that are coming up today, I don't know, it's just there's a lot that's missing there, because there's a lot to unpack there, because that could not have been put any better.
Thank you.
You know, because we know that there's like, I don't know how they're playing with the school money and how they're making people pay all these taxes for schools, and to have schools to not be allocated at least the resources necessary. That's a problem as well.
It is.
And I just don't understand how they do that. How do you assess schools' current culture and identity areas for improvement?
We do a culture assessment. It's a unique tool that we've been able to develop and trademark within our organization. Had a great group of educators as well as business professionals that have some absolutely amazing results and contagious culture within their organizations, that we work together. and I put a group of individuals together, and then we had a brain session, a brain tank session, and we developed a tool that we use to be able to go in and assess culture. This is one of the first steps of our model. Once we come in, we do a free culture assessment, and then we upsell them on a culture audit to be able to really give you a deep dive. But in this tool, we're assessing everything. We send anonymous people within schools to do tours, and they're looking at, how did I feel going to the parking lot? Were there adequate signage in the parking lot? Did I know how to get to the front of the door? How long did I stand outside before the door was open? From a security standpoint, did I feel secure if I was a parent? Was there enough security? How long did I have to wait before I was greeted? Was I greeted? Was my meeting or tour accepted immediately? What was the conversation with the individual that was taking me? How was their energy? When I walked into classrooms, we have metrics of the mood of the students, of the content that is being taught, of the displays in the building, of the cleanliness, all of these various topics that I think a lot of people aren't looking at, a lot of educators aren't looking at. I think a lot of times we look at schools, and I've been in the weeds. So we leave on Fridays and teachers leave their classrooms an absolute mess. And it's simple things that you learn at home. When I was growing up, I couldn't leave the house unless my room was clean. And my room being clean didn't mean I threw everything under the bed. That meant my bed was made, my shoes were put and organized where they needed to be put, my clothes were up in the closet or whatever the case may be. The laundry was folded and put away. The kitchen was clean. So looking at teachers' desk over the weekend, or looking at signage on the floor, or the classrooms or the hallways weren't clean, or all of these various components that contribute to school culture. Certain processes that are in place. We give them a specific list of questions that they can ask the tour guide or even administration when they have the time to meet them. And how are these questions answered? How are teachers hired? So it's this long list of questions. It's this tool that we use. And then based upon that, we send it back to the school, and they say, hey, based upon an anonymous experience that someone had, this is what they said about your school. We'd love to set up some time to be able to communicate and meet, so that we could put some things in place so that you could be able to improve the school culture, as well as potentially improve the achievement scores of your school.
So can you share a success story from your work that had a significant impact on a school community?
That's a great question. I'll talk about the school that I just stepped down from, Bonnie Cone Schools. When I came into Bonnie Cone, we had some serious challenges. Our leaders were disjointed. There were many cases where students were being discriminated on. Disciplinary issues were not handled appropriately. There were certain bias and unconventional strategies that were being used to be able to discipline students that weren't in alignment with the community need, parent expectation, and then also the mission statement. We were disconnected from the grander community as well. And when we came in, when I came in and led some initiatives at the school to be able to enhance, we ran into some challenges. One of the challenges was we really exposed the challenges that CMOs, who are charter management organizations, have in running charter schools throughout the East Coast. When we have organizations that are business focused, that are adopted or integrated within some of our schools, that don't have the best interests of students, that are focused on putting butts in seats rather than high academic achievement. And there's no excuse why we were paying, these organizations millions of dollars, and we were still seeing some of the same test scores for 3 and 4 years consecutively, rather than rerouting those finances and revenue into the school, into being able to bring on counselors, into being able to equip our students with better curriculums, into being able to reduce our class sizes and then be able to bring on more equipped teachers. So that was one component from just a macro organizational level. As we fast forwarded through that, we started to see some of the challenges that leaders were facing and the relationships that certain leaders had with their overall teams and organizations as well. We started seeing that certain teachers didn't feel seen, didn't feel heard, didn't feel respected. That when they would speak up and use their voice, they were reprimanded, even fired and let go and terminated. And it wasn't a culture of transparency. It wasn't a culture of empathy. It wasn't in alignment with the mission, nor was there any idea of what the standard of excellence was across the board. Students didn't have a pride of wanting to go to this specific institution as well. So from the outside looking in, beautiful buildings, beautiful uniforms, turf field, all of the bells and whistles. Again, Charles, from a financial perspective, but inside the building, there were many challenges. So what we put into place is an opportunity for students to feel seen. We implemented what we called a service learning program. And then we adopted different organizations, nonprofit organizations, and we saw an increase in volunteer hours, an increase in parent engagement, a decrease in disciplinary issues, an increase in high academic achievement and test scores, increase in retention. We were able to remove certain leaders from their positions and transition them away. We were able to change the structure organizationally of the CMO, and we were able to adopt a higher quality provider to be able to serve some of the academic needs. And I think, in this work, anyone listening, this work is not easy. It's challenging because you're going to be going up against a system that is not built to be excellent. And when you're exposing the current landscape or the current processes of a system that is predominantly white and is not built for Black and brown students and children and families to be able to succeed, you're going to be met with some challenges. You're going to be met with some real deal hatred at times. But I always remember, and I tell my team this, we're not here for adults, we're here for children. So I could care less about what people feel if we can see the success of our children and the exposure that our children get and the achievement that our children get to be able to experience as well.
Wow. That in itself, it sums up some conversations that I've had this past week. And when we got to talking about education's a problem, and it's a problem for the wrong reason. It's for pretty much really all those things that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Are the wrong reasons because they don't want to fix the system because there's a fear of whatever it is. I call it the fear of the unknown, but
Exactly.
I think we all know what the fear is.
Yeah.
And so rather than just let it be what it is, we'll just continue to cripple it, crush it, do whatever have you, and just say you have to come and you have to attend.
Exactly.
You're not going to get the best, especially if you're living in a particular area.
Exactly.
How do you incorporate feedback from students and staff when assessing school culture?
So what we did and what we continue to do is we do a school assessment form. We built a QR code for this form, and then we position it in every single classroom across the school. So this is an anonymous form that allows students to pull out their phone and be able to just click on the QR code and assess it at their time. And it's a simple set of questions. How does the school make me feel? Do I feel seen? How would you recommend this school to another school or another student? And it's a list of questions, and we review that data, not quarterly, not yearly, but monthly. And then we send those reports to the school. And then our goal is to be able to decrease some of those negative responses and be able to put systems in place so that we can improve some of those positive responses. And what we've seen is a correlation between negative school culture and low academic achievement and progress. So once you really start to listen and implement some of the things that the students say and the parents need, then you start to see buy-in from the students, and then it begins to improve their overall academic outcomes.
Oh, wow. So, what challenges do you commonly see schools facing regarding their culture?
Students don't want to be there. Um, they don't. I think that's one of the biggest things that we see is that we talk to the students before we talk to the parents or before we talk to the teachers or before we talk to the leaders. Yes, we hear from leaders and we want to hear their vision, but this is the students' school. So we want to hear what students feel. They don't want to be there. They feel that their teachers don't hear them, don't see them, don't listen to them, don't consider them in developing their lesson plans. Teachers predominantly don't feel recognized. They don't feel that they can go to leaders and get the necessary coaching. And they also don't feel that they can go to leaders and be transparent and when things are being dropped or balls are being dropped. There's no camaraderie or there's no real collaboration as well. It's more of a silent competition that leads to creating conflict and then leads to attrition as well. What we're seeing from leaders is that leaders don't like to be held accountable. Leaders are put in this position and they receive a title, but they're not held accountable to be able to deliver results when they're responsible for. As well, these are some of the challenges that we're seeing within schools. And frankly, board members are focused too much on governance and finances rather than pushing leaders to be better and being present at the school to be able to ensure the achievement of the school.
So, for those professionals that are on boards that are actually watching this show and listening to what you're talking about right now, tell them what you're going to do to help them because they need your help. When they reach out to you, tell them what you're going to do for them.
Of course, if you're a board member or a school leader or even an educational leader, and you're looking at your monthly reports and you're looking at your school data and you're disappointed, I want to let you know that there's a solution. At the Culture Lab, we are designed and we were birthed to be able to help you not just focus on culture, but to improve your achievement, improve your enrollment by first focusing on the culture and the invisible curriculum at your school. This is the relationships between teachers and students. This is the relationship between leaders in your community. This is the relationship between your school community and all the stakeholders to its mission. You had a mission, you had a vision, you had a belief system at the onset of this specific school being developed, and you've veered further and further away from it. So let us help you be able to achieve better academic scores, improve your footprint in the community, and be able to have a school that actually teachers, students, parents, all stakeholders, community leaders actually want to be a part of. We can continue to work with you, partner with you, and we love to connect with you at your leisure.
Wow. So, look, we could do a whole show on this, but I'm going to transition over to your work as an author. So, we're most likely probably going to have to bring you back. But let's talk about your career as an author. What motivated you to write your first book, and what was the experience like?
That's a great question. So my first book, The Mission Plan, The Decision, was actually 3 books. So when I was in college, I took amazing notes. In every conversation that I had with people, I was always a lifelong learner, and I've always been very inquisitive. So anytime that I had a conversation with someone, I was taking notes, whether it was on an internship, a mentorship meeting, or just something that I may have heard and having a conversation, it was always getting documented. What I started to see is that certain opportunities that I had as a student, where I was able to intern, study abroad, do some amazing opportunities, even being a college athlete and being a high performing student as well, other students weren't able to get those opportunities. And I always wondered why. Was I just this elite, or did they just not have maybe a 2-parent household that taught them? Maybe they just didn't know how to navigate the system. Maybe they just didn't have the training or the exposure that I had growing up. So I started putting all this information down on paper. And the truth is, I should have released it in college, but I didn't have the confidence or the courage to be able to release it because I thought, like many people that I've helped write books, that I wasn't good enough, that, I'm just a 19-year-old kid. What do I have to know about publishing a book? So I went, graduated college, worked for Johnson & Johnson for 6 months, got let go. And at that time, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. My parents said, look, you have 30 days to figure it out, or we're going to put you out. And I was like, all right. So I released this book, The Mission Plan, The Decision. And I was like, oh my God. So I started working with a publisher, and it was so long that we split it into 3 books. So it became The Mission Plan, The Decision, The Discovery, and The Destiny. And it became this whole series of books, but we only released the first one, and we sold $30,000 worth of books within the first 30 days. So, and this was back before Instagram and, Facebook advertisement and all of this. And I was reaching out to everyone I knew, and they were just buying books. And I had people recommending the books. I had asked schools to buy them in bulk. Various schools that I had been working with, just mentoring and volunteering, I asked schools to buy this for their schools. So $30,000, 30 days later. And I was like, wow, maybe I have something here. So then I wanted to start speaking about the book. And then one thing led to another, built my first educational consulting company all the way back then. We opened up an enrichment center for students in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then at that point, then we started to release books. And if you were to ask me this today, like, Kyle, why have you released so many books? Because I believe that every chapter that I complete in life is a testimony for someone else that's currently going through that chapter. So when I graduated college and I had achieved so much, it was time to let all of that knowledge out so that someone that was struggling could be able to have the blueprint of navigating those times. Then I wrote a poetry book on various things that I had gone through. When I turned 25, I released that book because oftentimes in that period of time, we're just trying to figure things out. So I wrote a book of 25 years of my life and the various things that had gone on in those 25 years to be able to connect with various readers. When I wrote the book, The Writer's Game, I built a publishing company that was very successful. And we worked with educators and C-suite executives, and we taught people how to leverage their story to be able to write a book, build a business, and be able to create income for their families. And I wanted to teach people how to do it, but oftentimes I couldn't go and speak everywhere. So we wrote a book to duplicate myself, and then started doing work with schools. And then that became Contagious Culture. And then all of these other resources become just continue to come out of that as well.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations to you. And I think that, anytime you can, when you start writing, sometimes the writing gets so good that you just don't know when to stop.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Can you tell us about the themes you explore in your writing?
That's a great question. I think earlier on in my writing, it was self-discovery, finding your mission and aligning your decisions and passions with your purpose. Activity doesn't equal achievement. So getting an alignment was super important back then. I think now it's really focusing on character still counts. And what I mean by that is that, in former books that I've written and even businesses that I've created and exited from, in our society, in our capitalistic society, we focus so much on money and accolades and titles and all these different things. And there's a quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's, what is a man that achieves everything, but it has lost his soul, or is that's empty? And I had achieved a lot. I had, flown around the world and spoke to audiences, thousands of people, and all of these various things, and had books and money and all of these things, but I was empty. Suffering from depression, anxiety prone, having panic attacks, manipulative and lying and being an opportunist and all of these things to create more income and more income and more income. And you lose yourself in the process of trying to just do so much. And my message for anyone now in my life is stop focusing on what you want to do and just focus on who you want to become. Don't focus on doing more, focus on becoming more. Because when you become more, then you get an alignment with what God has for you. And then there's a peace when you're operating in that lane. and there's a lack of worry, and there's a confidence and a courage, and there's a boldness that you show up with, and there's a light that's always on, um, that guides you. And I think that it took trial, it took so much to happen and occur in my life over the years for me to really wake up and be humbled, wake up and be brought down to my knees, and wake up and lose everything so that I could really be able to find the person that God always had for me, that was behind all of the mask that I put on myself.
Mm. So, so just as you're doing that reflection,
Yeah.
and you just think about, the things that was happening in life. You're a young man, you're trying to achieve, you are achieving, and things are happening one after the other. Can you tell our audience, like when you mentioned the depression and the anxiety and things of that nature, was it just being so self-absorbed in all the work that got you to that point, or was there a combination of things that brought all of that to a head?
That's a good question. Hmm, I think I think it's a multitude of answers. I think you get self-absorbed in the work when you haven't done the work filling the voids from your past. So then the work became a void filler rather than purpose and intentional. So for me, what I recognize is that when I would go through things, rather than feeling it and doing the work to be able to get through it, I would create another business. I would write another book. I would find another opportunity so that I didn't have to deal with this feeling, because dealing with feelings feels uncomfortable. And I didn't want to feel uncomfortable. But one thing that I've learned is that there's velocity in your vulnerability. Um, and you being open and honest and transparent with yourself about, hey, how do I feel? And maybe I do need to take a weekend off. Maybe I need to just stop and just, it's okay to watch a movie. It is okay to eat a burger. It is okay to maybe just take off for a few days and just get yourself together. And I think we have this culture, especially in America, where it's, you have to eat healthy all the time, and you have to work out 10 times a day, and you have to build this business, and if you don't, you're just a loser. And I think I even adopted that. I wanted to be fit, rich, and just famous. And I think all of these different things broke me down. And then I realized that as long as you're happy and joyful and faithful and loving God and all of these various things that are completely different than what we teach in this culture today, there's a different level of peace that I feel from that.
I'm proud of you. I am really proud of you
Thank you.
because resiliency is you're the example of being resilient.
Thank you.
Because I think a lot of times when people come to that point of they've got that much pressure, they fall down and they never get up.
Yeah.
But you continue.
Yeah.
And in continuing, what that shows is that you've got the wherewithal to do whatever is necessary that you want to do. This is what a lot of people need to understand, that we, sometimes we can have obstacles. But in having those obstacles, if we don't keep pushing, if we don't knock that wall down, then we're going to always stay behind it.
I agree.
And so this is, like what you're talking about now is just so perfect for the audience, because as as I told you, we target the underserved and marginalized because it's about the inspiration and the motivation. So when they see people that look like them that can do, they can do,
Exactly.
being that example. And that's what I just love. I mean, because there's so many more people that have that story just as yourself. People need to hear this, and besides that, with you helping in education, that makes it even more important, because that's the real key. That's the real key.
I appreciate it.
How has your identity influenced your writing and topics you choose to address?
I think, Charles, how my identity in my first few books growing up, or excuse me, not growing up, but that I wrote was based upon how I grew up. I think as I grew, this is interesting. That's a great question. As I grew, my identity was shown in my writing through what I was doing. I think this is the first season where I am reprogramming and recreating my identity based upon the story that I'm writing, rather than attaching identity to title or industry or even how you were raised, attaching identity to who you actually want to become. And if you were to ask me, like, well, who was that person? I'm learning that person now. And I'm writing a story about that person daily that I actually like to tell the story about. I think a lot of times what I've learned, and even coming on shows in the past, is you lead with what people want to hear so that you can get opportunity rather than just who you are and what you go through so that you can connect with people genuinely. And if you do that so much, you forget who you are and then you lead with title. And no one ever really gets to meet the actual person behind the title. And I think it's important for people to lead with who they are, regardless of title, because even if you go through something, you'll really be able to see who's really in your life because of the person, not just because of what you can do for them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and that too is so true. So let me just ask you this question because I think this is the real boom. What is your motivation?
My children. Yeah. Um, you know, it, it talks about in scripture like the sins of our father. And I think about that because a few years ago, I was sitting at a restaurant in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my son, and I was just having a conversation. I was like, Carter, what do you want to do when you get older? Typical question. But his response was what really changed my life, I feel like, forever. He said, Dad, I want to write books like you.
Mm.
And at the time, I stopped, I had to pause, and I felt really emotional. And I was like, wow. I was like, well, let's do it. And on this year, a few months back, he published his first book. It's called Carter's Journey Through Space, and it talks about the solar system and all of these various things. But I posted about it, and I shared with people about it, and there's a sense of pride that I feel about that moment. And there's a sense of pride because as a father, I did something. I created an environment for him to produce something that was important to him, rather than imitating my children to be another me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my children are my motivation because it requires me to empathize. It requires me to be transparent. It requires me to have a standard for myself of excellence. It requires for me to be aligned with God's mission for my life. That's contagious culture. Because if I want something to bleed into my children, I have to be it. And I think that is the foundation, and I guess the overall vision of everything that I'm creating today, and why it's so in alignment with who I am, is because I am contagious culture, and I wanted to create contagious energy with my children so that they can produce at the same level that I'm producing at 9 years old and at 2 years old, in the way that they're called to produce. And I think if we can have the spreading of positivity, or the spreading of motivation, and the spreading of inspiration in our households, then just imagine what we could be able to create in our communities.
Mm. Oh my God, that is so true. Um, who are your literary influences, and how have they shaped your writing style?
Whew, that's a great question. I've never been asked that one, Charles. That's a great question. Um, I would say W.E.B. Du Bois would be one of my greatest influences, period. His work, his leadership, his tenacity, his commitment to a standard of excellence. I believe that I've imitated and emulated my life a lot off of him. Um, but literary inspirations, I like James Clear, author of Atomic Habits. I like Simon Sinek, author of Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last. Um, I love Dan Sullivan, the book Who Not How. Um, there's so many. Oh my gosh. Rachel Rogers. You know, We Should All Be Millionaires. Tony Robbins. Um, I've read a lot of books, and it's interesting that you asked that now because I think I'm in my era of leadership development, of strategy implementation, of strategic thinking. Um, I love the idea of stoicism, and really, I love the classical books, the Prince by Machiavelli, the Medici family, and learning about their rise to power. Um, I love history as well. I'm not a big fiction reader at all, as much as I used to be when I was a child. And that's probably why none of my books are fiction yet. But I think those would be some of the first people that come to my mind quickly.
Well, that's a transition into this next question because what role does storytelling play in your work as an author?
It's everything. So since I was a child, I've always told phenomenal stories. Now, some of those stories were made up as a child to be able to create exaggeration. But my mother and father would tell it best. I've always been a performer in a sense. Um, so I love telling stories. It's as simple as, you know, something happens in your life and you're so quick to pick up the phone and want to call someone, and you're creating the experience so that they can experience it with you on the phone. And that was the premise of my business that I created, the Writer's Game. And because there's power in story. When you think of any great thing that has happened, it all started with a story. Whether it's a story on why these people should be annihilated because of the color of their skin, or why these people should vote because of the inefficiencies within our American government, or why we should go to war with this country, or the story of why you fell in love with someone and why they should marry you. Like everything that we do is based upon story. Whether it's the enslavement of people, the adoption of a new president, whether it is the love story of why I want to spend the rest of my life with you, or whether it's the story of, you know, I went through this specific thing and now you don't need to do that because you're going to end up here. Stories are built to motivate, inspire, for you to connect. Stories are everything. I couldn't imagine a life without telling stories.
So, how do you hope your books will impact readers, particularly those from marginalized communities?
I am, before I am an educator, a father, a writer, a business owner, a consultant, I am a Black man. I am a Black man in a country that, for the most part, was not built for me, and it still doesn't stand with me. And I'm proud to say it. But I've still, as a Black man, as a first generation college student with two parents that grew up in the projects, with a mother that was pregnant at 13, with a father that never stepped foot on a college, never had a corporate job, you know, with a sister and brother that didn't go to college at all and had, you know, children young. I graduated college. I found my way to get to the highest place in education in a school district at age 30. I've published 8 books. I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've been on some of the top shows and podcasts around the world. I've traveled to multiple countries. I've fallen in love and fallen out of love. I've had children that, when I had my first son, I was living in a roach infested apartment to really being able to build my first home from ground up and be able to pay my down payment without assistance um, because of my work. And with all of this would not be possible without God. So I say this to anybody listening. I recognize your pain. And yes, I've had two parents, and there's a certain privilege that I've had because of having two parents. Um, but I still recognize the work that it's taken me to be able to get to this place. I still recognize that I've had to be 2 times, 5 times better than my counterparts to get a halfway there. I still recognize the battle that I'm fighting against. I still recognize that it took one mistake for me to be put out of a system, but then it took one choice for me to put myself right back into it. I still understand the battle, but I still choose to not make excuses. I still choose to be better. I still choose to be resilient. I still choose to learn. I still choose to be committed to knowledge and committed to growth. I still choose to be kind. I still choose to believe in something better. And I'll be damned if my circumstance or the color of my skin or my parents' journey or my deepest, darkest secrets or the worst mistakes or the choices that I've ever made define the story that I'm writing that God has in front of me. There's no excuses for you not to be successful in this country.
Wow. Uh, that was, oh wow, that was a whole lot. Um, and I gotta tell you, you know, I really do think, when you put all of that into a book, and your books are not fiction, that people have got to feel the story.
Yeah.
They've got to feel it because everything that you are feeling emotionally or what you want people to know, you're putting it in the words.
Yeah.
So, like when you do book signings, have you done any book signings?
Oh yes. All of my books I've done a book signing except my newest one.
So, when you do book signings, I mean, what's the reception like?
Um, it's interesting. People are really excited to meet me. It's still weird when it's the excitement. I've had people that were crying in line to meet me. That's still a little weird. But it's I'm humbled to say the least. I love writing stories, but I love sharing them even more. Because I know every book that I sign, every book that I deliver, every book that gets shipped or sold is a person that believed in me enough or believes in themselves enough to want to be able to do better in their lives. I wish that I could donate 1 million books to people around the world, but that would take a lot of capital. Um, so I continue to write them and then even offer the electronic versions of my book for free because I want people to have access to a manual or a blueprint or something to be able to transform their lives in the ways that they were called to transform them. So I love people. So any opportunity, it's the opportunity to answer questions or connect on various things outside of the book. I love it.
So, I'm actually gonna have to jump over here to this final segment here because there's a lot of questions I'm not gonna be able to get to.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to bring you back, but we do Black History 365,
Okay.
and I ask you the influences through African American history. Who's the most influential people in your career and your life? As far as your career goes, you said W.E. Du Bois, and I want you to tell us how has W.E.B. Du Bois shaped your understanding of education and its role in society?
So W.E.B. Du Bois is the reason that I started my first nonprofit in college called Project Shine. He has a model called the Talented Tenth Model, and I believe that I believe in it. I believe that if we focus on the high performers and those kids right there on the cusp, and really invest in them and give them what they need, they're going to create the innovations and the products, the platforms, and the resources for that 90% of individuals. I believe that. I do believe that Blacks and people of color don't believe that they ever deserve to be a part of that 10%. And I think that's the problem of why we haven't disrupted into those industries. When you look at any industry, we are the best. I think in the business industry, there's a lot of people that have emulated or taken our products or taken our innovations or taken our creativity and monetized it because we didn't understand the legal side or the actual economics of our innovations. When you look at many of the things that we still use today, simply stoplights, are various things that we created as a culture. So I think when we think of sports, when we think of entertainment, when we think of creative space, when we think of a lot of the spaces that are leading American economics, it's ran by, or it should be ran, or it's created by Black and brown people. So I think that that model that he has created and before trademarks was an actual thing, I believed in it, and I wanted to be the best of the best. I wanted to be in the 10% so that I could really be able to create opportunities for the additional 90. I think in my current career, a colleague in front of mine, Bakari Sellers, CNN correspondent, politician, I like him a lot because he's a disruptor. I think he's in a space where I would hope to be one day, where I would have the courage to be able to completely speak my mind on national television, but be able to still be accepted because of his education and his results, because of his ability to be able to understand these various topics, from political topics to economics, his versatility, his range of perspective. That is one thing that I learned early in my career, to have range. You should be able to talk about antiques. You should be able to talk about golf. You should be able to talk about entertainment. You should be able to not just focus on the idealistic things that are in your culture. You should be able to have range on the various topics that you can converse about as well. I think that's important. Those are definitely two people, just top of mind for sure.
So, which of Du Bois's ideas or works resonate most with you and your career?
That's a great question. I think that this idea of reconstruction is everything that I've done. Reconstructing how we look at education, reconstructing, excuse me, how we approach Black and brown students in education, reconstructing how we look at affordable housing within our communities, reconstructing how we look at the family structure in the Black family structure, and how the lack thereof families is the reason why a lot of these structures or a lot of our children and communities are the ways that they are. I think that everything that I've tried to do was try to redesign or really bring back what Blacks used to represent when we look at 20, 30, 40 years ago. Elite, highly educated, respected, integral, community focused, disruptors, fighters, resilient, strong, family men. I miss those people.
So, they're not going anywhere. They're here. It's just some people are finding it difficult in learning how to maneuver. And so that's why there's so many different places, so many different areas, platforms, industries, things of that nature, where people are trying to weave everything together and make it grow out like it used to be.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing right
Yeah.
now. And so that's the thing that, well, I have a project coming up. I don't want to throw that out yet, but I have a project coming up actually that that's already a predictor. But how do you see Du Bois's concept of double consciousness reflected in the experiences of students today?
Could you say that one more time?
How do you see Du Bois's concept of double consciousness reflected in the experiences of students today?
I would say that it shows up in everything, especially students that are Black and brown that are in charter schools or private schools or predominantly white schools. I would even say that I think it's existent in everything. Um, to help people understand first what the idea of double consciousness is, for anyone that doesn't understand. I'm familiar with it just from this perspective. If I'm wrong, Charles, please let me know. It's this idea that there's this internal conflict inside with the structures of the dominant culture, in a sense. When I go into a school, and just taking away students for a second and just making this about education, when I go into a school and there's conflict with specific teachers not conforming to the system, that is a form of double consciousness. When there's a student that goes to a private school in an affluent area or a charter school in an affluent area, but is in a single mother home or a single father home, that is experiencing certain challenges and underserved, that is double consciousness, because the majority of students may be middle class, upper middle class, and then this one or two students feels like they can't fit into the system. And if we don't have teachers that can be able to be inclusive and create equity within the classroom and processes in environments that makes that student feel safe, then that student goes back and rather than conform, the student creates conflict and goes against the system, because the student doesn't have the educational acumen to just be able to disrupt in the system. And if they try to disrupt in the system, now they're looked at as a disciplinary issue rather than someone that's just different than the system that is in place. That's why equity and inclusion is important within classrooms and school structures, and being able to create remove barriers that currently exist so that all students that come from various walks of life can feel that they are existent in this system and that there is no dominance. There's only a system in place to be able to develop students.
So, in your opinion, how can Du Bois's philosophy be applied to improve school culture?
These some good questions, Charles. These some good questions. I think as I process out loud, I believe that his philosophies can be used. First, we have to understand this idea of excellence. We have to identify this idea of excellence. Once we understand this idea of double consciousness, we have to communicate it. And that's where that transparency piece comes in. Then we have to rewrite our mission statement in a way that includes the variation or the variety of students that we have coming into the system. And then we have to put safe measures in place. And when students feel that they're coming or there's conflict against the system, we have to put systems in place or measures in place, whether it's a person that they can go to, whether it's an anonymous box that they can be able to put notes in so that things can get implemented to be able to support that student, or processes in place where students don't feel like they have to act out to be able to fight against the system, because all behavior is a form of communication. We have to be able to have measures in place that think through all of these things. That's the approach that I would take.
And can you share how Du Bois's advocacy for education as a tool for social change informs your work?
We first have to understand, just like Du Bois talks about, we have to first understand our own identity first. I think a lot of times we go into a system, we can easily conform to a system when we're not rooted in values and identity before we go into the system. And I can say that from my own perspective as well. If you're not rooted in who you are and what you bring to the table and your values, you go into a system with titles and accolades and revenue, and then you become it, not recognizing that that's not in alignment with where you're supposed to be or who you're supposed to be. So I think on the front end, we have to teach students who they are, not existent of this system. We have to continue to teach students and provide resources within the home for parents to help equip students with understanding who they are. Then we have to be able to better communicate what this institution's goal, mission, and values are. And then be able to ensure that coming through this organization or this school system, this transformative process, like I talked about earlier, that students don't lose themselves, and we equip them throughout this process to becoming the best versions of themselves.
And another part of what we, the other part of, the influence in Black history, you said your mother influenced your life. And can you tell us in what ways has your mother been a guiding influence in your personal and professional life?
That's a great question. I think my mother, pregnant at 13 years old, um, youngest and only Black executive of Volvo Cars with no college degree or anything. Um, she made it to senior executive VP level at that time, a Fortune 100 company. She was a trailblazer. She was the epitome of resilience. When I think about her, I think about this idea that there's no excuse not to be successful. If she can do it and grow up in South Jersey projects with a child at 13 years old, why can't you? With a college degree, with two-parent home from the suburbs. When I think about my father as well, he's a man of integrity. He was one of 13. His mom died when he was 7, and he never had a father. And he is a model man for me. He doesn't lie. He doesn't curse. He doesn't drink. He has been married to my mother 30 plus years. And he is the support and the backbone to a family. And he's a man of God. And I think they were the perfect example for me to be in alignment from an integrity standpoint, but to still have that dog in you as well, to be able to go get the things that you want in life. That there's no excuse, but still having empathy. That you can still be kind, but still kill it in your career. That you can still root yourself in character and still align yourself with calling. That you can still set boundaries professionally, but you can still build things that are successful. So I think both of them have been equally inspirational in my life. And I think that that's why it's also important for me to be that for my son and daughter.
So, can you share specific lessons your mother taught you that have shaped your career?
Yes, be 2 times better in everything. Um, I think it just, and if I'm, I have a book that's coming out in the future that's going to be talking about and sharing a lot of the lessons that they've been able to give me. But one of the things is you have to be 2 times better. You have to work hard. You have to be independent, an independent thinker first, an independent doer, and an independent innovator. You shouldn't be codependent on other people to be able to create success for you. Understanding how to build relationships, leverage relationships, and nurture relationships. Definitely my mother has taught me. My father, on the other hand, be a man of your word. Honor your commitments. Be a man of integrity. What you say you're going to do it. Kill him with kindness. He's always said, be kind to people, and just be honest as well. And those two together, I believe, has been super important in my life.
So, how has your mother's experience or background informed your understanding of education and culture?
Well, she is now a senior VP at Amazon in customer experience, and that's all culture, corporate. Uh, And, my mom has always been about the experience. And I think, interestingly, it's probably the first time I've said this out loud, I think I was inspired to build this idea of culture because of experience. And, this experience when we go to resorts, or this experience when we're flying first class on a plane, or the experience when you go somewhere, or the negative experience that you have when you're spending money somewhere, whether it's the experience when you go into a dealership and you're looked at like the help and not like I can afford a car. So all of those things shape human interaction. So I definitely believe that her career trajectory has motivated me in this way to be able to create better experiences, for the human interaction within organizations as well.
And so, what role did your mother's values play in your approach to consulting and speaking?
That's a great question. I would say that from a value standpoint, um, my father has been the person that's always kind of mentored, coached her, as well as me in regards to that side. I think from a technical methodology standpoint, my mom has always been good navigating the space. But when I'm talking about values, or when I'm talking about those various things, I've always gotten that from my father.
Um, Last question. How do you honor your mother's influence in your writing and public engagements, especially when discussing Black history?
I think the best way to honor my mother is to help her write her first book to tell her story. And currently, we're in the process of finalizing the final edits of her newest book that will be coming out this summer. And I think anybody that's listening, the best way to honor your mother or father, or even the generations that come after you, is to be able to use your gifts and your experience and help them be able to produce by using your giftings that you've been able to use. So, how I've been able to write books and be able to transform lives, I'm now helping my mother write a book so that she could be able to tell her story and transform lives as well.
So in closing, if you can give our audience words of wisdom, some things you want them to know, how they can connect with you via social media, checking out your website, what you do, how they can reach you, for those that need services.
Anybody listening right now, this is my word to you. If you lost your voice today and your heart stopped beating, what have you built that can speak for you? I'm not talking about the money that you would leave, not the houses, not the revenue or the cars. What have you built that you can pass to the next generation? Whether that is a school and all of those students have been transformed by your work, whether that is a book and all of the readers are made to be different because of your words. I want you to focus on becoming more so that you can build more and leave more to the next generation, and leverage your testimony, leverage your gift, leverage your skill to be able to transform the generations after you. My name is Kyle King. I can be reached at kylesking.com, kylesking.com, and on LinkedIn. Connect or follow me on LinkedIn at Kyle S. King. And thank you again, Charles, for this amazing episode. And I'm looking forward to the next time.
Yes, sir. So I'd like to thank you again for being here. This is really a great show, and like I said, we could have went for days about that first part of the show because it was really really important, and definitely we've got to have you back. For those of you that have watched the show tonight, Kyle has provided more than just inspiration and motivation. He has clearly displayed what it is to never give up, but to always achieve and overachieve as necessary. When you believe in yourself, you can do anything that's necessary. We all have obstacles, but in the process of having those obstacles, do we stop or do we keep going? That's clearly a yes. That's a rhetorical question, which means there's nothing nobody out here cannot do. So in this whole process of learning especially some things about how our systems work. They might not be perfect, but let's come together as a community. Let's build these communities brick by brick, persons by persons. Let's build these communities and let's make them what they should be and what they used to be. Nobody can dictate our future but us. For those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, I appreciate you for watching. But if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I'm asking you to please support us by subscribing, hitting the notifications button, so that each and every time we have a show, you'll be able to catch that show live because you will be notified that the show is about to start. Or you can go to the channel and you can watch all of the previous recorded shows and you can enjoy them as much as you'd like. I'd like to thank you again, Kyle. I'd like to thank everybody for watching the show. We've had a wonderful week, and I will ask you all to please tune in next week as we have another great series of shows for you guys on America and Black and White. You all have a great weekend, and please come see us next week.